Okay.
I got. Welcome to 100 Yards of Football. I'm your host, Bobby Butler, and tonight is our Legends segment. And I got my man, Mr. Leonard Bernard Mitchell, back on the show with us tonight. Bernard, welcome to the show, brother. Good to have you.
Well, Bobby, when you called me yesterday and we finally connected, I had to move some meetings around and some other things we had going on. And I said, well, what could we do tonight?
Right.
And I kind of thought it fitting.
Mhm.
I started thinking about, the old NFL, where they come from in 1933, where they where they actually segregated the league.
Right.
And George Preston Marshall kind of quietly and secretly talked all the teams into not having any black athletes
Mm-hmm.
play in the NFL. And then in 1946, shortly after Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier in baseball, going into 47 season, Woody Strode and Kenny Washington, two UCLA products,
Right. That's right.
were both signed, played for the Rams.
He did.
And
He did.
wouldn't it be the left coast that would bring two of their own from UCLA, and then shortly thereafter, Marion Motley, the big Mott from South Carolina State,
Bad
came
boy.
back on the scene. He and
Mhm.
Bill Wills, they reintegrated the league.
Yes.
And when George Preston Marshall, so he had the only team east of the, south of the Mason-Dixie,
Mm.
quietly put this process in place not to have black ball players in the league.
Mhm.
And the owners all agreed to this process. And then, of course, once Woody and Kenny were signed from UCLA, the stage was set. The rest is history.
The rest is
But
history.
still, the Washington Redskins was the last team to integrate in 1962 when they signed then Bobby Mitchell from the Cleveland Browns. With a lot of people say, well, what do you mean? Well, Bobby Mitchell and then the late great Jim Brown were in the same backfield.
That's right.
So in order to transform the deal that would bring then Ernie Davis from Syracuse to the Cleveland Browns, they traded. They made the move to trade him. So then the owner of the Browns then took Ernie, and then of course then we know the history behind Ernie being the first African American to win the Heisman Trophy, when rightfully everybody thought that Jim Brown was going to win it the year he and Paul Hornung were dueling. And somehow they decided Hornung was more fitting than Brown. However, when Ernie's records at Syracuse and his performance set the standard, he became that guy. And so when then the owner of the Browns decided he wanted Ernie in the backfield, they traded him. And then, of course, Preston's big thing was, hey, you know what? I'll sign black ball players when the Globetrotters will sign a white guy to play on their basketball team. and then, as when you look at history and being a kid in high school and middle school, junior high school, I won't say middle school, because when I was in high school, when I was in
middle school,
junior high, we had 7th, 8th, and 9th grade.
That's right.
So history was one of those subjects that allowed me to reinvent myself, to go back and say, well, what is this? And as I began to become a student of history, I began to read all these different stories and dynamics. For instance, a lot of people don't realize that then Jackie Robinson was an outstanding halfback.
Yes, he was.
He was also a great track athlete. He could have played in the NFL, but for the fact he suffered a major leg injury, and he was also a commissioned officer in the United States Army. So when you begin to put this historical twist on athletics, whether it be baseball or the NFL, stop in baseball, it came about and it went away. Then that's when we had the Negro Leagues barnstorming. You had Satchel Paige, you had Jock Chisholm, you had these guys who could rewrite history books in baseball. And when I look at Jackie's wife, Miss Rachel Robinson, who's over 100 years old, I listened to her give a speech one day. She said, but for the treatment my husband had today, she said, because the pressures of being the first black in Major League Baseball was was difficult for him to fathom that all he was trying to do was play a game.
Right.
You know, between the racial animus, the hatred that was displayed toward him, the pressure that was on him to perform, but more importantly, the way in which he was treated for playing a game.
Right.
That kind of pressure drives a man in ways that none of us could imagine. I mean, because when we were, kids growing up, for us, I mean, and I'm a little older than you, our beaches has not been fully integrated in South Florida. Right. So as a kid growing up in Delray, I was in the middle of desegregation in 1966. I left all black Spady to go across to Delray Junior High. Well, we're only 2 years removed.
Right.
The Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed, giving us full integration to public places like the beach. And when you go and tour places like, let's say you go to Nassau County, you'll see the sign American Beach, an historical place. Well, that was the beach that blacks from Jacksonville and parts of Georgia had to go to because they couldn't go to any other beaches.
That's right.
So then we think about the game of football or baseball. It was a game. But here we were, some of the best athletes in the world. There were things enacted to keep us from being a part of that process.
That's right.
So when I look at this perspective, and I look at what's funny is in 1988, the same Washington Redskins, which was 55 years removed from that process, Doug Williams wins their Super Bowl.
All right.
So I would imagine that George Preston Marshall would be roasting in his grave.
Rolling over.
What do you mean? Here you have from Zachary, Louisiana. I call him the Louisiana Long Rifle, who was treated in a most disrespectful manner, I believe, by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, when all he wanted was, I think, maybe $500,000 a season, or that's pennies. I mean, when I look at some of these quarterbacks today, and some people will probably get upset when I say what I'm going to say, because the measure that's always been used is, have they won a Super Bowl?
Right.
And you know what? Everybody talks about Marino. So what can we tell you? He was a great passer. Did he ever win the big one? No. But he made it to the NFL, right? He made it to the NFL Hall of Fame, right? He's an NFL Hall of Famer. He was a great quarterback. Nobody's discounting that. But the question is, did he win the big one? No.
Never won.
Was it his fault or was it Shula's fault? Some people, diehard Dolphin fans, how can you say? I'm saying to you what has been the measure used by the great sports writers. So when I go look at, should I say that Patrick Mahomes is a NFL Hall of Famer because he's won how many? 3? He's won 3 quicker than any modern day quarterback. Am I right or wrong? No, I'm not. History bears me out with that. He won 3 quicker than Brady. He was younger than Brady. And so when we break these numbers down, if we're going to be true to what we say we are, then let's be true to that. Let's not back up and reinvent it. Because, for instance, when you look at the year Lamar Jackson was drafted, he was the last player taken in the draft. There was Josh Rosen, who this guy, whatever his name is, Mel Kiper, they called him the draft guru. He said that this is the most draft-ready NFL quarterback coming out of college. Where is Josh Rosen today?
Where is it?
Okay, now there were a couple of others, but Rosen was the one everybody put out there. Here is Bill Polian, who built the Buffalo Bills. Oh, how many Super Bowls did they go to? 4? How many did they win? None. Anyway, he is, like I said, I'm not trying to rewrite anything. I'm just giving you the history. But I will give you Bobby Beathard, right? I will give you the guru in my mind who I've watched and studied.
That's right.
He built who? The Dolphins. The Redskins.
The
Chargers. Had a little help with building who? The 49ers.
The 49ers, that's right.
What? And how many of them won Super Bowls? The Dolphins. Okay. The 49ers. Yes. And so did who? the Redskins. And the only team that he built that did not win one was the San Diego Chargers.
That's right.
And so if I'm going to let Bill Polian be the guru that tells me that Lamar Jackson might not be able to play quarterback, then I've got to lay his history out of his failings when he built that team. Was it Jim Kelly's fault? No, but did Jim Kelly get to the Hall of Fame? Yes, he did. Did he ever win the big one? No, he did not.
He did not.
But he was the guy that ran the what? So when we begin to break these numbers down and we look at all these dynamics, well, this is, if we're going to put the history from a historical perspective of the NFL, let's be factual. And you know what? I know ESPN and the NFL Network probably mad as all get out because they got nobody on their staff that could say and do what I do and put it out that way. I don't even have a teleprompter. Okay, they have a teleprompter somewhere off screen. All I got is this 586.
Right, there you go.
Right here, and the knowledge that I have able to put in my brain and obtain and retain at almost 70 years old and never miss a beat. You know what they call that? That would be, thank you, Miss Brelford. Thank you, Libby Wilson.
There you go.
Thank you, Ms. Nelson.
Miss Nelson, there you go.
Yes, these Spady Elementary.
Miss Curtis.
Miss LaCurtis, Miss Cromartie, Miss Weston, Miss Walker, Miss Suarez. Thank you, all of you educators who poured your love into us and made us understand the value of learning, reading, and knowing your history and being able to talk about those things that are factual. So as that young man who will soon on my next birthday, I will say, thank you, Jesus, for allowing me to see 70. Okay. That's right. 70. And with that, I have seen these dynamics in athletics from every angle, Bobby, every angle. So when I look at it, when I think about you going to Florida State, it reminds me of Anquan Bolden going to Florida State, coming out of Pahokee High School as one of the best rated quarterbacks in what? In the state of Florida. But what did he end up playing? Ended up playing wide receiver. You were recruited as a what? Quarterback. But then along comes Shotgun Charlie from Thomasville, Georgia.
Yes, sir.
Who was a 3-sport athlete, who was a punter and an assortment of other things, but he was an athlete. And he became that quarterback. Could that have been you? It could have been, but they recruited you specifically to play cornerback. But guess what? Your chosen position from the time you played with the late Matthew Sergeant Bump Mitchell was quarterback. And his son, were his two quarterbacks that had more undefeated teams, I believe, in y'all's lineage than any quarterbacks. So you were a field general as a young man. And so when I look at these dynamics, and then I go back to Elridge Dickey, Tennessee State, Big John Merritt, Jefferson Street, Joe Gilliam.
Yes, sir.
747 Big Adam. Okay. When I go back when I go to Mississippi Valley State, Archie the Gunslinger Cooley, the Satellite Express. What did they run? 4 and 5 wide. Everybody said, well, it's Mouse Davis run and shoot. Archie Cooley was running that for the scout teams when he was in North Carolina as a scout team coach.
Right.
He brought that offense to Mississippi Valley State, the Jackson State grad. And the reason I got to really kind of talk to the gunslinger when I was coaching at Atlanta, he drove, his host of coaches drove their diesel Volvos to Delray Beach.
Wow. They
came to the back of Atlantic High School. I'm back there with Chuck Smith, Wilbur Narvell, Jason Jester, and all these kids, Anthony Hamlin, and they pull up with these, who was these cats? He get out with his cowboy hat on and his boots. I'm Archie. I said, the gunslinger.
The gunslinger.
And he had his defensive court. Yeah, right there. And all those guys went out. He offered every last one of them scholarships.
Wow.
In fact, Chuck Smith played for him at Mississippi Valley. Then he followed him to Arkansas. Wilbur and Chris and all those went, and they ended up, and Chris ended up at Cookman. Of course, Jason went to Florida A&M. Anthony and all of them got offered. Anthony went to the University of Miami. Andre Thaddeus ended up at Minnesota. But Archie the Gunslinger Cooley was in Delray. Wow. And he said, man, I want all these. What you say? I want all of them.
Wow.
He went in Chuck Smith's house, sat down, talked to his mom and dad, and he sent me their their letters of intent packages, and they signed and they went.
Wow.
And see, this is how, growing up as a kid, I watched these dynamics because I can remember when I met legend when Jake Gaither, the late Jake Gaither, spoke at Atlantic High School the end of my junior year for our athletic banquet.
Wow.
The football banquet he spoke at. Randy Cooper and the coaches had gone to FAMU. They had gone to Jake's coaching clinic. And at that time, we went to his coaching clinic and they came back talking about Bear Bryant and all the coaches that were there. And so here comes Alonzo Jake Gaither in the cafeteria of Atlantic High School.
Wow.
Delivering. That's big.
Big.
Here he is. You got John Martin, Major Calloway, and all. Here's the legendary Alonzo Jake Gaither with 6 mythical national championships in black college football. Quarterbacks like Emory Collier, the late Ken Riley, Major Hazelton, Willie Gallimore, Bob Hayes, Paramore, Miranda.
Loaded.
You know what I mean? Long list.
Loaded.
Loaded. Hewitt Dixon, okay?
Hewitt Dixon, Oakland Raiders.
Oakland Raiders. Here he is talking about blood, sweat, and tears, and somebody got to pay. And so I began to say, well, how would we? The season's not quite here, but before we jump off into the hoopla and the parade of who was this and who was that, we got to talk about Jimmy Johnson, Rayford Johnson's brother. Decathlon athlete, cornerback, first big shutdown corner they called him in the league. San Francisco 49ers. His brother was a decathlon athlete. They all went to the same high school from California. People are like, what? Yes. So don't get all this stuff twisted up.
That's right.
These guys changed the league for everybody.
For everybody.
And then if I were to think about it in any other historical sense, it would be a lot like the zone defense didn't come about till Bob Hayes came in the NFL. We got to do something.
We got to do something to stop him.
We got to do something to stop him because he outruns everything we put on the field.
That's right.
Then all of a sudden, here comes the likes of Mel Blount. Where you from, Mel? I'm from Southern. Who am I? I'm the first shutdown corner. Forget what you heard about everybody else. I'm that guy. Well, Dick Night Train Lane might have something to say about that. Okay,
you got a lot to say about that. Now.
But Dick Night Train Lane got a lot to say about
that. That's my man right there.
That's your man. But see, they used to call Mr. Johnson. They said he was the solo corner because nobody wanted to throw his way. They said if you had thrown his way more often, he would have more interceptions.
Yeah, more interceptions.
Everybody had about, well, you can't play over there because he was the first big corner.
Right.
And if you think about it, if you saw Rayford Johnson, who was a decathlon athlete who won the gold medal, this is his brother.
Right.
This is a phenomenal athlete. When I look at that, I was doing some reading on Antonio Gates, kind of switch it up a minute. Antonio Gates led his Kent State basketball team to the Elite Eight, scored 21 points, averaged 10 rebounds, and took this team to the Elite Eight.
Wow.
But yet, guess what? He led the league in pass catches as a tight end and touchdowns. But guess what? He ain't in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
how does he not get in the Hall of Fame?
Right.
And so I'm looking at all of these antics and dynamics when the history of the league is sometimes a mystery. And oftentimes I say, let us be truthful with what we put on the table.
Right.
It should have never taken Ken Riley to be awarded the Hall of Fame posthumously. See, Ken Riley played 17 years. How many games did he miss? He was 4th or 5th in interceptions forever. And why was he? And then he had more fumble recoveries. And I think he almost had more pick sixes than anybody. Because what was Ken Riley? Ken Riley was an exceptional athlete, but more importantly, he was a Rhodes Scholar. He quarterbacked for 3 years at Florida A&M University under Jake Gaither, drafted in the 6th round by the Bengals. Not as a quarterback, but as a what? Cornerback. But he was an athlete. And so when you and what I think I heard Chris Collinsworth say that when he saw him in Cincinnati, the most remarkable thing about him was that nobody ever outworked him.
Wow. That's it.
He had a book on everything there was about receivers and how to beat them.
Sure.
And so when I look at that, but then I have to back up and then think about, the likes of Willie Lanier, Kansas City Chiefs. Okay. He played, and then Curly Culp, who was the original monster in the middle playing nose tackle. And his job was to beat the double team, make you double team him so Willie could tackle.
Can make tackles. That's
but then when you look on the other side of Willie, there was Bobby Bell.
Bobby Bell.
Okay. Now, can you imagine looking at, then there's Emmett Thomas. Then there's Buck Buchanan. Listen, and where was Buck from? Grambling. Where was Willie from? I believe he was from Morgan State. And where was Emmett from? Bishop College. And so Bishop College.
Where's that?
Like, how many people get drafted from Bishop? I don't know. That's like your relative, the late Cannonball Butler, first player ever drafted from Edward Waters, and the only player drafted out of Edward Waters. Only player.
To this day.
And in the year 2024.
To this day.
When we begin to just peel back the onions of the league,
yes,
and its true perspective, had it not been for the reemergence, reintegration of the league, it would not be where it is today.
That's right.
Now, you can call it whatever you want, because when you go back to that first All-Star game that was played in New Orleans, where the black players did not play and left because of disparate treatment, couldn't catch cabs, couldn't stay in the same hotel. Everybody show up for practice. Where are all the black players? They gone. We ain't playing.
We're not playing.
That was the first I don't know if it was organized, but it was a boycott.
Right.
It wasn't like the 1960 Olympics when Carlos and Tommy Smith stood on the podium and did their salute. These guys quietly packed up and went home and said, "We ain't being treated. We going home." What it reminds me of? It reminds me of the cornerback who played for the then Green Bay Packers, and he played for Vince Lombardi. He had married. He married a young white female, and the league asked Vince Lombardi, "What are you going to do about this?" Nothing. It doesn't stop him from playing football, huh? Well, the norms. What norms? Vince say he show up every day to practice. His wife doesn't have any problems with it. Why am I going to get involved in it? But see, what people didn't understand about Vince Lombardi was that Vince Lombardi's had a brother. I don't know if he was younger or older, but the brother was allegedly gay, and Vince had dealt with that. But Vince Lombardi also, when he stayed out in the sun for an extreme long length of time, he became, his skin, he became, they called him, they had some rather savory names for him. They would they would call him Black Vince.
Black Vince.
and of course Willie Davis and those guys who played for him at Grambling, and he was ahead of his time, because his teams were the first teams to fully integrate on the road and in their dormitory life in camp.
That's right.
And people, what? Yeah, listen, let's not get this twisted. As much as the league was moving in certain directions, some teams moved faster than others. Like I said, 1962, the Washington Redskins signed their first black player, and he was a great black player in Bobby Mitchell. Bobby Mitchell came from the Browns with a proven track record. So as we emerge and move through all that, then we then the discovery of HBCUs and the perennial athletic prowess. But then there is Bill Nunn, who wrote for the Pittsburgh Courier, who in fact, he put the Pittsburgh Courier All-American team together. And then he had a conversation with then owners of the Steelers family and their group. And he said, "You're not going to have anything until you get the right players."
Right.
And then the particular draft in question that catapulted them to where they were and moved them toward that Super Bowl title. When you look at that draft, there was Joe Green, there was Mel Blount. They signed Donnie Shell as a free agent from South Carolina State. They ended up with, I want to say, Stallworth and a few others. But
John Stallworth.
From Alabama, where? A&M.
That's right.
And so when you look at that build and that quality of players off that draft, that set the stage. They also ended up with Glenn Edwards, J.T. Thomas from Florida State. There was, of course, Mike Wagner. There was L.C. Greenwood, Arrowhead Ernie Holmes, Dwight White. And so then when you put that group together, that built the cornerstone of the steel curtain defense.
That was the foundation, bro.
That was the foundation. So I don't care how you look at it, but then Bill Nunn made it to the Hall of Fame as a what? As a scout.
That's right.
And but Bill Nunn was a sports writer. But Bill Nunn set the table for the standard to go after the kinds of players that would revolutionize the league.
That's right.
And as he was doing those things, everybody looked, who is Bill Nunn? See, now, then this is why it gives me pause, because when you go back, the Kansas City Chiefs had the same kind of scout. Everybody, what they got? Now, the way I tie this together from a collegiate standpoint, I look at the team that was from USC that went to Alabama.
All right, now.
And put the whoop on Bear Bryant.
Put it on him.
And it made Bear Bryant go sign John Mitchell, who was his first black player, right? Who was
and Wilbur Jackson.
And Wilbur Jackson.
That's right.
But Mitchell was an Alabama native who was at a JUCO. And shortly after they got Wilbur, I think was one of the best centers ever in the league. They got Dwight Stevenson.
It's crazy.
And then they ended up with Tony Nathan, Jeremiah Castillo, and on and on.
But let me interject something real quick with that Alabama situation. USC goes to Alabama. They travel from California, LA, and played in Alabama. The starting tailback for USC was from Alabama.
Yes, he was.
And couldn't play at Alabama.
Couldn't play at Alabama.
Nope. But he had to go all the way to the West Coast.
And he came back.
And put that thing on, right?
Bear Bryant said, I ain't going to get out black no more. I'm quite sure he had a different conversation.
I'm going to give you some of those.
The stands in Tuscaloosa was like this. They were, you know how you say when E.F. Hutton speaks?
Everybody.
Well, USC spoke that night.
They spoke that night.
Sam Bam Cunningham.
Yes, sir.
Listen.
Yes, sir.
And then he had a black quarterback.
Yes, sir.
Who is this team? USC.
Alabama
had, I think, Johnny Musso and some other kids, and these skinny leg tailbacks can't run against this. But anyway, lest we digress.
Right.
But then I think about Jerry Levias at SMU with then Hayden Fry, who recruited him, who later went on to Iowa, the University of Iowa. But that's who recruited Levias. Then I think about Texas, which was the last team in the country, which was the Southwestern Conference, to integrate.
That's right.
Okay. Now think about that. Now here we are in 2024. The University of Florida and others have gotten rid of all of their DEI programs. I was going to ask them, y'all want to give your checks back for all the bowl games and all the national championships, all of the positivity created by those athletes winning national championships for you. Because had it not been for the Emmitt Smiths, had it not been for the Harold, for Lewis Oliver, had it not been for the LeCounts, had it not been for the assortment of players who lined up for you wearing Gator orange and blue, where would you be? So if there was an emergency to say we ain't going until you do something different. Listen, I don't mean any coach or any of y'all can look at it and allow somebody to play politics for you if you like. But when you go after the programs that allowed your universities to emerge from mere being just able to play, because somebody put the analogy out there. Do I think the A&M teams under Gaither could have beat any of the teams in the D1? I said, listen, I'm gonna tell you what Jake told. It was one of Jake's most, people call it his folklore, but Jake said, I could take my tier unit down to Miami, play Miami for breakfast, come back up through Gainesville and put the blood unit together for the Gators and make them go on to sleep. Then I would come, that's the blood.
Right.
Now I'm gonna bring up my sweat unit.
We're
gonna come to Tallahassee, and we're gonna unleash speed. We're gonna unleash agile, mobile, and hostile. No, we wouldn't have whooped them. We'd have made them change their mind and go to a different locker room.
Right, exactly.
Jake said we were that good.
Right, they were that good.
And unfortunately or fortunately, and I say I call it the devil of two marriages. I'm gonna use that term because it allowed some young men to ingratiate and move forward and help their families by going to these great institutions, these large D1 schools, and change their lives forever. Then it allowed that certain crust of athletes who forever were going to ever be regulated to playing at Division II or 1 2A level to still go off to school and become academically trained and prepared to have a future beyond football.
Right. That's right.
Now, as I look at it now, you've created DEI and got rid of, call it what a diversion, inclusion, and equity, whatever you want to call it. If that's your true feeling, then why should we send our kids there?
Right, exactly.
Because I will tell you this: when I was a student at Florida A&M, when Florida State recruited black athletes, they recruited them, but they spent 99% of their time on the yard.
Come on now,
across town. And so I can remember the team that went to the NCAA championship round. All those guys playing basketball. They used to be on the yard more than they were at Florida State.
That's right.
And so I used to think, okay,
that's right.
Skip Young. I know he later became a Muslim, but he was one of the athletes, one of the basketball players that was sort of started the FSU transition of change. And so I used to look at those guys and man, because they used to all hang out at Tully Gym and play pickup games.
Right.
And Tully Gym, that was the old gym they practiced in.
I know.
I know you know. Somehow, how you remember all that? Because I used to walk. Because we would go to the Western Sizzling and grab something to eat, go by Tully, play a little ball, walk over to the Grab Hall, Valley Hall, Kellum, back and forth.
I love it, man.
But when you think about all this, and you think about the league, and you think about this awareness and history and where we are, I want young athletes to understand why it is important that they understand the foundations from which their futures have been built, so that when they reach that apex in their careers, they recognize the shoulders that they stand on of the men who made the ultimate sacrifices in that game called the NFL. Because, look at right out of our own state of Florida, our man, the Deacon from Eatonville. Deacon Jones.
Yes, sir.
Eatonville, Florida.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Well, I don't know if he went to Wildmore Tech, but he's from Eatonville.
Eatonville, that's right.
Eatonville. And you know what? Eatonville is that all-black community on the other side of Orlando. And you say, what? Eatonville, that's where the Deacon's from. And I want them to think about, the Rains High School of old with Bob Hayes that he went to. Bob Hayes, Harold Carmichael. Listen, all of these guys, Greg Coleman, Henry Lawrence, Palmetto High School.
That's right.
I want you to think about these processes. I want you to think about Willie Gallimore. I want you to have in your mind, Buck Buchanan, Emmett Thomas. I want you to, when you Shaq Harris, Shaq came, got drafted by Buffalo, ended up in Los Angeles with Chuck Knox. And every year he was under that center, took them to the playoffs.
That's right.
I want you to think about the late Jefferson Street Go Gilliam, whose game was where it was, but the pressures and the dynamics going on within that, what happened in Pittsburgh, and I don't know all the dynamics, and we will probably never know. I want you to think about, just the pressures that were on him. I want you to look at Ed Too Tall Jones. All these guys come out of big, John Holland,
HBC,
Kennebrew. All these guys come where? Out of Tennessee State. Jimmy Marcellus. Where? Tennessee State. What? Tennessee State. Don't get it twisted. Aeneas Williams.
That's right.
Where? Tennessee State.
That's right.
What you mean, Tennessee State?
That's right.
Who? Robert Brazile, Vernon Perry, Willie Richardson. What you talking about?
That's right.
Vernon Perry, who ended up from playing with Houston, was a Tennessee State grad playing.
Right.
Mr. Houston. I used to call him shock absorber Houston. He hit you. What's that? You know, where they from? These dynamics aren't just interesting. They set the cornerstone and the foundation of what? They're like 37. The total number, I think it's either 37 or 43 athletes from historical Black colleges and universities. My numbers may be a tad off. I'll have to verify them, but it's more than 35 are in the NFL Hall of Fame.
Hall of Fame. That's right.
They ain't talking about showing up, asked to be in the gate.
In the gate.
Sitting there looking at you.
Right.
And then people say, well, why is that important? Well, first of all, you regulated it to segregation, reintegrated it in 47. And then 55 years later, Doug Williams beat John Elway for the Super Bowl and the least publicized and the most scored, most points, most passing yards in the first half than any quarterback in the modern day history. Now, I know y'all don't want to talk about that, but that's a fact. Because everybody had, if I'm not mistaken, I believe they were supposed to run Doug Williams out of the stadium that day.
That's right.
The bookies had the bookies had the Broncos doing what? And here, running all over. Here's Timmy Smith, an unknown
looking tailback.
Here the Smurfs, Saunders and Monk and these guys.
That's right.
And here's Doug, who hyperextends his knee, gets up from the turf. Everybody like, they're not that tough. They're this, they're that. He not only proved that he was tough, as the center said, you call him whatever you want. You can call him a black quarterback. You can call him he's my quarterback. And he took us to the promised land that day.
He did.
He won that Super Bowl.
He won it.
With his intestinal fortitude, his leadership and his athletic ability, and his ability to change plays at the line of scrimmage and beat you at your own game.
That's right.
Okay. And what's interesting is that Joe Gibbs was his quarterback, was the offensive coordinator in Tampa when he was there.
He's in Tampa.
When he was in Tampa, Joe Gibbs signed him coming out of the Oklahoma Outlaws.
He knew he was getting.
And Joe Gibbs said to him he wanted to be traded because Jay Schrader was the quarterback.
Right,
Joe Gibbs said, Doug, I'm not going to trade you because you're going to pay dividends.
That's right.
And Joe and Doug was talking on this special, talking about how angry he was. And when Joe Gibbs said, I'm not going to let you do this.
Right.
He said, I see where you're going to take us.
Right.
And of course, he ended up, that is when part of the story goes that Bill Nelson was the quarterback coach. And I think that was his last coaching soiree in Tampa based on, and I'd have to verify some information, but Joe Gibbs told him, this is your quarterback. If you're going to have a session with him where you're going to dress him down, you will not do it in front of the players because he's the person you want to lead this team. And I want you to treat him a certain way. Okay. Now, I don't know what brought all that about, but Joe Gibbs set the tone. And he talks about the relationship he had with Gibbs because, as you and I know, he lost his wife while in Tampa.
Right.
And that was part of the thing that moved him on from going to Oklahoma and just the loss of her and the way in which he felt like the Culver House family had treated him by not. And everybody joked about, he wants to be paid Elway money. He wants to be paid quarterback money. He wants to be paid fairly based on because that was at that point when they did get into the playoffs, it was because of his leadership they got there.
Oh, absolutely.
So they hadn't been there. And so when Gibbs told him he wasn't trading him, he said he was in a funk and started to ask to be released. And he said, no, you're not going.
Don't do it.
Schrader went down and never got back on the field.
Never got back on the field.
Couldn't get there. And everybody, he
Exactly.
lost his position because he got hurt. No, he lost his position. He got hurt. But, Bostic, the center, said, we're on a roll. He said, the team had a meeting. Nobody wanted Schrader back under the center.
The center.
We don't want him.
That's
He
right.
said he can, but if Doug gets hurt, that's another story. But no, we can't mess this chemistry up.
We can't mess
And
it up.
so, and then to watch it unfold, and then to see his college coach, Eddie Robinson, get to walk out on the field and see, Eddie Robinson, Jake Gaither, Big John Merritt, Marino Chasm, R.C. Gordon, I think, was the coach at Jackson. And when you just think about these guys, Chasm was at Alcorn. John Merritt was at Tennessee State. Jake was at Florida A&M. Eddie Robb was at, Eddie Robb was at Grambling. These were the barons of HBCU football. And when you think about the guys who came out of the corn, Roy Nell Young, the big corner, played with the Philadelphia Eagles, number 40.
They had some guys, bro.
Listen,
they had some guys.
Listen, you can't. And when you think about who came out of Jackson, okay, Hall of Famers, Brazil, right?
That's right.
Peyton, Hall of Fame. I think they got what, 2 or 3?
Don't forget my boy, number 20, the left corner now. Come on now.
Lim Bonnie.
Don't forget Lim Bonnie now.
Lim Bonnie. All these, look, that's 3 Hall of Famers.
Right there.
Right there.
Right there.
And then when you go to Grambling, you got who you got? You got Willie Davis. You got
that's right.
Doug. You got let me see. There's another one. And see, this is and when you go to A&M, you get Bob Hayes, you get an assortment of Bob because you get 2 gold medals and a Super Bowl ring.
Right. Exactly.
No other athlete in the Hall of Fame has that.
Wow.
None. Wow. And he did 2 gold medals. One for the 100 and the 4x100.
4x1.
And then he was also on the team that retired the Penn Relay Cup, when they in the 4x100 meter relay.
That's right.
That was the late Bobby Lang's track team.
Track team, right.
Okay. You got Hazleton, all all of them were from Central Florida except for Bob.
That's
right. Eugene Milton was from Ocala, Florida. Listen.
I try to tell them about the Florida boys, bro. They don't want to hear me.
Listen, you know what? Everybody at one time when when I just do the muck, Ricky Jackson, Hall of Famer, Pahokee.
That's right.
Dirty Waters, Cheney State, Pahokee.
That's right.
Anquan Bolden.
That's right.
Pahokee.
That's right.
Mr. Bowie, Pahokee, played for the Philadelphia Eagles.
That's right.
Fred Taylor.
Riedel
Anthony. Ray McDonald Jr.
There you go.
Santonio Holmes.
Jesse Hester.
Jesse the Jet.
Jesse the Jet. That's right.
All of them from where?
That's right.
You know what? And then if I just start, Carlos Carson, where is he from? John I. Leonard.
John I. Leonard.
Otis Anderson, where's he from? Forest Hill.
Forest Hill. That's right.
Even the other young man from John I. Leonard, Fagan. Kevin Fagan.
That's right.
He's a John I. Leonard.
He's John I. Leonard. That's right.
The boy that was a tight end from John I. Leonard played for the Colts. The young Haitian kid, his name, I just saw him at John I. A few months ago. But he came there playing soccer. Okay, ended up playing for the Indianapolis Colts.
Wow! And don't forget my boy now, AC now.
Well, look, I ain't going to Riviera Beach, Anthony Clark. Okay, by way of University of Michigan.
That's right.
And you know what? He started for Okay, listen, we're talking about Al Sutton. We're talking about the late Roger Coffey. We're talking about the late Antoine Russell. We're talking about all these guys. We're talking about Ben McCoy and so on and on. And we talking about guys who are in the Florida Hall of Fame as coaches.
That's right.
And then we got, if we even throw basketball in it just to be strange, we throw Floyd Andrews in. Who won state championships at Roosevelt, Palm Beach Lakes, and North Shore. North Shore.
That's right.
He coached too, Derek Harper.
That's right. That's right.
Listen, and he coached one or two other. He coached the Lowry boy who and the infamous. I had the privilege as a young kid watching Johnny Jones score 85 points in Carver's gym from Pompano Beach, Ely. 85 points. He went to Villanova. That was one of the first major signees of a black athlete out of Broward County going to a Division I basketball program. That was Johnny Jones.
Wow.
Out of Pompano Beach, Ely.
Wow.
See, so, listen, we have to embrace all of this talent, all of this greatness. But the one thing that makes it it sort of capsulizes is that these kids, these young men, and those who followed in their footsteps, they were in an environment where they were nurtured academically and athletically by men and women who cared about their success.
That's right.
And it was you saw it in their work ethic and their commitment and their character, because these were young men, and as the late Roger Coffey would say, if I let you slip now, when you get to life's decisions, you will not do what is right.
That's right.
And so they coached a different way.
That's right.
They taught a different way. And when people say, what do you mean? They taught with the understanding and a commitment of love and discipline and respect that you had to have for yourself, your teammates, and those around you.
Yes.
They said, because when you play on Friday, who do you play for? First, you play for your family.
That's right.
You play for your school, you play for your team, and then you play for each other.
You play for each
other. But you represent your community. And the coaching that went on during that era, it's hard pressed to coach that way now, because too many people want to get engaged in the process. Because people could come to our practice when we practiced, but that was about it. You could stand from there and look how we practiced, but you didn't intercede and, well, my boy got to do this. Listen, your boy's on a team. You know, stop being a helicopter parent and allow coaches to coach.
There you go.
Especially when they show a commitment to your child.
Absolutely.
And you see him at each stage getting better. And I would say, if we will allow that to happen in this new age era, because I would say that some of these young men are exceptional athletes, but you know what they lack? They lack the commitment to want to work. And what I can always say and would say is that when I looked at your era of athlete and those that were before you, everybody knew where you were from 3 to 6 or 7, 4 to 5 days a week.
Absolutely.
You were working out, perfecting what you did. Your conditioning, even if you had a job, when you got home, you went to that field, you ran your laps, you ran you went your steps, you've honed your skills. And it was a discipline within you.
Yes.
And you know, I used to watch Eddie Odom. I used to shag his balls when Eddie was a self-taught punter. And a lot of people, I mean, he could punt. He was the original Reggie Roby before Reggie Roby was born. You know, and people, what you mean? Look, his balls were doing this, and he said it was in the spin and the release. How you flip your foot to rotate the laces of the ball.
Right.
And he was a self-taught punter, kicker. There were no special teams people. And then I look at all the other kids who came along after him, but he would be out there on that field. And then I used to watch his baseball, not just his, but him and the late Robert Cornelius when they played for Mr. Hurst. And I watched how they played. Listen, you couldn't make this up.
Right. That's right.
And so him and Clyde Harris and all those guys on those teams, you know, Lewis Skinner, Beanpole from Boynton, who got drafted by the Red Sox, who was a 6'6" foul baller coming off the mound. You know, listen, they practiced their craft. And they worked at it.
They did.
And they put, and we were like, well, you know, they didn't have all, true enough, they didn't have social media, but they had other things going on. But that 2 to 3 hours a day, whenever they were there, that's what they worked on. And they didn't engage in frivolity. That was important to them.
Right.
And so when you looked at them, you know, maybe somebody say, well, you want to go back to that time? No, I want to go back to the era of where we allow coaches to coach, athletes to train, and we give them that space to bring out the best in our children.
Well, I tell you, bro, I got to say this, right? I always say this about the time that I came up with the Delray Rocks. I'm so glad that my parents never took me to practice. I'm so glad. Because they would have intervened, but I needed what Buck Mitchell was giving me.
Yes.
I needed what Bill Smith gave me. I needed all of that, but without my parents there, I didn't need them there digging in, watching. What? No, it was the way we went about things, and we did it.
It was the way we went about business.
That's right.
And when I look at, and everybody thought, well, you know, they just doing this. No, coaches want. Look, I coached in high school. Listen, you know what that check was. I figured it up. It was about 27 cents an hour.
It wasn't nothing.
It wasn't nothing because when I did summer training, the weight room, and you would get whatever you're gonna get in Christmas time, or you get the 2 checks came out to be less than $1,600.
Right, exactly.
And somebody had, what? I said, yeah, I ain't know what y'all think this is. Ain't nobody, you know, and my kids, my oldest daughter was young, and my wife used to bring them to football practice just so I could see them, because usually sometimes they would be getting ready for bed by the time I got home.
Right.
And so, and then I looked at the other coaches wondering what they are. And then, so I look at this new bill that's now before the Florida House to pay coaches, I think he's $17 or $18 an hour, you know, the head coach a little bit more. So but I told him, I said, when I was in Texas, I met a high school football coach who got a $75,000 supplement for coaching as the head coach for a high school football team.
That's right.
I said, what? $75,000. Right. That ain't got nothing to do with his salary. And I was at the time, I was in Tallahassee, and everybody said Gene Cox was the most highest paid football coach in Tallahassee, in the state of Florida.
In the state of Florida.
What do you mean? Because they said, well, he gets all the ad money off the books. What? They said whatever's sold, he gets that, and then the assistant coaches get a percentage. What? And I heard that story. I didn't hear the story in North Florida. I heard the story from a group of head coaches in Palm Beach County. Who say they met him and he showed them what he made.
What he was doing, right?
And I was in Washington Wilkes County in Georgia. Kenneth Baker was coaching up there. And I met his head coach one summer. And I said, where are we going? We're going to the coach's office. You know, the coach had an office downtown with a secretary. And he and his wife both had cars from the local Ford dealership that they drove. What? So the dynamics, and this is South Georgia, North Georgia, West Georgia. But then we come to talent-rich Palm Beach County. And the average college high school coach, that head football coach, does not make a $5,000 supplement.
That's right.
And when you figure out what he does to prepare his team,
that's right.
And some of them teach a schedule that's not fully loaded, but some of the older coaches did, and some of them. And I'm thinking, what?
Yeah, it's a shame.
And then we go to the no-fly zone. Actually, it's called North Florida. Coaches in Panama City making $30,000 a year as a supplement back then.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And we found, when I went to college at A&M, I'm thinking, well, what y'all coaches get? Well, our coaches don't get that. What you mean? And but then again, as I said, the dynamics of 100 yards of football, that everybody looks at the end product. I say you got to go back and look at where they started.
That's right.
And you look at these athletes, you look at their families, you look at the sacrifices, you look at the men, the teachers and educators and coaches in their lives. They lay the cornerstone for a lot of that growth.
Right.
And you can't talk about that without having some salute to them for the work that they've done unselfishly with these young men. And
let me ask you a question. How many hours you think Roger Coffey put in?
I would say he probably put in, as a kid, I used to hear that Volkswagen coming down the street. Because I stayed on 14th, right?
You stayed on 14th, the next street over.
And he stayed the next street over. Right. And I would hear him in the morning. The cleats would be coming down the sidewalk and in the street. I would hear him clank, clank, and you hear that Volkswagen. Here come Roger Coffey. Y'all late. And then if he be in the Volkswagen, he would have Henson in something behind him in the MG. Or he'd have Nate Collins screaming, walking behind him, and people behind him. What? Listen, they would be out there at 6 in the morning, and they were doing. And what was so unique about that era was that he got uniforms from the University of Miami. Remember that year he got all the practice uniforms from the University of Miami for all of his kids. And they didn't have a trainer, so he taped hands, ankles, and when we were very fortunate, Bobby, when we were at Atlantic and I was at Seacrest, we had trainers.
We had the Hilltoppers, man.
We had the Hilltoppers. We go out of town and we'd have our matching jackets and
we were nice.
With cool crests on them. And
that's right.
But still, as I said, the commitment to these men and to these athletes throughout the lineage of this game that where we are now, there were lots of sacrifices.
Yes, lots.
And this past week, Jimmy Johnson passed from the 49ers, and we lost Jim Brown this year.
Yeah,
we lost another quarterback, Bob Avellini, from the Chicago Bear era. Right. And you think about that history that will never be replaced.
Never be replaced.
Never be replaced. And then I look at some of the college coaches that came that way, but then just the dynamics of how it all emerged. We also lost Archie the Gunslinger Cooley this year.
That's right.
And so the football was that game that changed the history. And probably the most profound moment for me was when Jim Brown, Bill Russell, Lou Alcindor, he was all of them sat down with Cassius Marcellus Clay, then Muhammad Ali, and said that they were standing with him.
With him, that's right.
Dude, that was one of those events in history that said it all. That was the kind of athletic unity that, similar to that walkout in 72 when the black athletes, the black NFLers walked away from New Orleans because of treatment. Right. I remember when Elgin Baylor and a group of the Lakers went to South Carolina to play in an exhibition game, and they told the white ball players, y'all can stay here, but they can't.
Right.
And Elgin Baylor and the Lakers stayed in a different hotel. And, of course, 2 years later, that city had him come back and, gave him a key to the city and let him stay in the hotel that they didn't let him stay in. But these things are true. And unfortunately, we're in this era where nobody wants to talk about it because they said, you're making people feel bad. I said, well, the dynamics of feeling bad has nothing to do with the realism of history.
That's right.
It occurred.
That's right.
If you want to keep the name Jefferson Davis High School or Robert E. Lee High School on the table, then we've got to talk about this.
Talk about it, right?
If you don't want to talk about this, then we can't talk about history.
That's right.
Because these things occurred.
It happened.
These things didn't just show up.
That's right.
George Preston Marshall instigated a process to institutionalize the game the way he wanted it, to keep it the way he wanted it. And it wasn't until 14 years later in 1947, but yet in 1920, Fritz Pollard was playing with the Akron Zips. How do you go from that to 1933 and then institutionalizing the league in a segregated manner? And then you want me to sit and be quiet. I can't do that.
Can't do that.
And we cannot talk about the legends of this game without talking about their struggles.
That's right.
So I don't, you know what? ESPN, if y'all serious, y'all need to give me and Mr. Butler a call. NFL Network, y'all done got rid of the playmaker. Y'all done got rid of Pelissaro and some of you other folk. Y'all need a segment with me and Bobby Butler and 100 yards of football. Lay it down for you. That's right. If y'all think y'all can handle it, if y'all want to talk about the not for long league, let's talk about it. But let's put it out there the right way. And it's called history. And it's the history of this league.
That's right.
And if you're not afraid of it, and if you got facts to dispute what I put on the table, then let me know.
Let me know.
Like I said, this 70-year-old guy got more. I got a plethora that I can put it out there in such a perfunctory manner that you will not be prepared to handle it.
That's right.
It's real.
Right. Well, it's real, and they got to accept it.
You have to. I mean,
you got to accept it.
Art Shell, Who is he?
Man.
Modern day era head coach.
Modern day era.
Come on, Art. Now look at us. What we got? What we looking at now? Now you're talking about you got the defensive coordinator from the Rams. You got a man in Houston now. You got all of a sudden. But then you also had look at what you did to Eric Bieniemy. Who does what he does as an OC? Look at what Leslie Frazier did in the league and building defensive and what did you do for him? Look at my man over in 49ers. His defenses were always above the standard.
Absolutely.
Come on. Look, why? Listen, why? don't why?
Right, exactly.
Listen, Mr. Good, Roselle, Tagliabue, and Mr. Goodall, however they pronounce your name now. Challenge them to do the right thing.
Do the right thing, exactly.
Make the league be what it ought to be. Because if our presence was not there, what would you call it?
Exactly.
If our presence, I ain't talking about nobody else's.
That's right.
Our presence.
That's right.
Huh? When you over 70% of the league looks like Bobby and I. What you say?
That's right.
Huh?
That's right.
If you're gonna take some coaches and get them 3 or 4 turns at the switch box, and others you regulate to just one. Dan Quinn has had how many teams?
Wow.
And then I don't know. Listen. Some others, I'm thinking about the Miami coach. His name slips me at the moment, but he didn't do anything in Miami. Went to the Jets and didn't do anything, and get what he did.
Right.
Everybody gave him a turn at the switch. So look at Caldwell. Why? Please explain it to me.
Exactly.
You can't. You got the Rooney Rule. Okay, what does that mean? And y'all get bent out of shape with Tomlin because he may salvage some people.
Right.
And I look at my man who was in Miami who had a winning record when he left. But why did you get rid of him?
Right.
You why? I mean, I understand you own the team.
Crazy, man. It's crazy.
But it is the league.
It's crazy. Yeah.
But the legends of the league are built around those who look like us. And yes, but also there were many men who happened not to be white who played in the league and who played well.
They play well, exactly.
But you have disingenuously disenfranchised us in a way that's unfair. And that's the only way I see it. And if you think I'm being harsh, then so be it.
Yeah.
But my 70 years of living, I am not going to be quiet and talk about a subject that facts support what I say.
Well, I tell you, the list is long.
It is long.
When you start talking about coaches, I remember, when Jimmy Ray was a part of the Falcon organization, coached wide receivers, and he left and he came back. And they fired the head coach, and he was the interim coach. And next thing you know, he didn't even get an interview for the job.
Jimmy Ray's roots run deep. He was at Michigan State as a quarterback, played on the team from Fayetteville, North Carolina. He and Bubba Smith, and he played together on the same team. Bubba Smith wanted to go to Texas, but the University of Texas at that time wasn't recruiting black athletes. So he ended up at Michigan State. And so, as I said earlier, the Southwestern Athletic Conference was the last conference to actually desegregate and recruit black football players.
That's right.
And so don't everybody, because if you go back and look at that Cotton Bowl game between Syracuse and Texas, when Ernie Davis beat them in the Cotton Bowl, that Syracuse team, listen, people play. They mistreated him disingenuously for a reason. So why do you think everybody? Oh, well, what do you mean? Well, it took them. We ain't gonna integrate, and they meant that.
Right? Exactly.
So why everybody? Oh, you gonna make people feel bad? Well, you think the lynching memorial in Alabama is cause somebody mistreated somebody. No, they took somebody's life because they looked like me. So what do you think that family felt like? Do you think Medgar Evers' family felt that way? Somebody says, what did that have to do with football? Well, that's part of the history of the league and the country.
And
if you don't like it, then stop trying to bury it. Tell it.
Right.
Because what is it? Because Ole Miss, MSU, the Ole Miss Rebels, they had to switch around just to hurry up and make their positions change so they could compete.
Right, exactly.
So tell me, what's the difference?
What's the difference? Right.
The difference is you want to tell it your way, and I'm going to tell it my way. My way offends someone because they say I'm angry. I'm not angry. It's just a fact.
It's just the truth.
But, you know, like as I said, being a college student, being an ROTC student, a commissioned officer in the military, it was by virtue of my sacrifices and the sacrifices of many other men like me.
That's right.
That we get to practice this thing called this game, but we also get to live this life and have the freedoms that we have. And I have the freedom to express and define the history of a culture that defines a game and a league that was built on the sweat and brow of men who looked like me, who had to reinvent themselves from 1920 to 1933, from 1947 to 1962, and then in 1988, for the first quarterback to look like me to win a Super Bowl title, and that was 55 some odd years ago. And then if you think about where we are to now to the present, and you do the math, the Civil Rights Act from 1964 to 2024 is not that long ago. So don't play that game with us.
That's right.
Play it with somebody else.
That's right.
But teach our children and let us be better stewards of where we're going in life, so that the history of a culture and a people and a society is factual based. Because if you can have folk walk down Pennsylvania Avenue in Klan uniforms talking about the birth of a nation, then look, Bobby, you know we done had a lot of fun tonight.
Oh, we had a lot of fun, man. Hey, and let's end it right there. But listen, man, I really appreciate you. I want to tell you how much I appreciate you. You know, we've been knowing each other a long time. And we started talking about history. We can go a long way, because when we talk about, we talked about a broader subject tonight, but we got so much to talk about that you and I haven't even started yet.
Well, actually, I have a group of students that want me to do a video dynamic of the history of Delray and redevelopment, beach process, school desegregation. And so, well, when we gonna get started and when you gonna have some? I said, well, you know, give me a minute and let's figure out how we want to do it. I said, because I want to go to my old neighborhood. I want to walk the streets and want to show you where Old Spady, and we're going to go on 2501 Seacrest and show you where the old Atlantic was, and the football field and Hilltopper Stadium. And then we're going to go over to the old teen town and talk about it. Listen,
you give me goosebumps, man.
And we're going to go over to Block 48 where y'all used to practice.
Block 48, man. hey, listen. Hey, ain't nothing like it. But listen, man, I really appreciate it tonight. You know, we passed our time, but man, we can talk forever. And I love you, man. I appreciate you, man. Hey, and listen, let me tell you something. Bernard was a great athlete himself.
No, I was okay.
That. Yeah, no, even though okay.
Okay.
He grew up. Listen to this, ladies and gentlemen. For those of y'all who don't know, he grew up in the suburbs of Carver Park.
I was on 210 Southwest 14th Avenue.
He grew up in the suburbs right outside of Carver Park.
Me, Gus Burgess, Donald Monroe, Jerome Burgess, Leroy Temple, the late Simon Taylor, Larry Temple, all us grew up three doors, Big Dave Richards, all us grew up, LaVoris Grisby. We grew up in that block. All the
Grisbys down the street.
Abraham Wooten. Listen, we were in that little block. Charles Cornelius was my high school classmate. Chuck Jones. Listen, we and Barry Hill grew up in Carver Park. And listen, we were and the late Robert Cornelius, who was, I think, if he had ever got a chance to suit up for Major League Baseball, would have changed the dynamic of being a shortstop. Wow. There was no greater athlete in my mind than I had ever seen in life. And Eddie Odom, who is still alive today and has been running the Delray American Little League for the last 50 years, he and his wife, and how he sustained that league on a shoestring budget, but produced some of the young men he produced and kept baseball in our community and in our culture.
Yes.
Is a salute to him and the things that the community was able to do. And when you look at that, that is who we are.
Amen.
And that is who we were, whether it be the late Sergeant Matthew Bump Mitchell or Mr. As I like to call him, Mr. Stevens, and that group of men who coached these kids. Walt Stevens, aka look, who went to Tennessee State on a football scholarship. He and the late Wilbur Jones and Anthony Holliday were great athletes themselves. Bud Tippett Jones, as we used to call him.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Listen,
sir.
my next door neighbor. Or Anthony Grisby, who later went on to Bethune-Cookman, was drafted in the 5th round by then Vince Lombardi when he was coach of the Washington Redskins. This is who we are.
That's right. That's right.
We had to live up to that process. That was the prospectus in front of us.
Absolutely.
So we all felt like we had to compete because of what was done before us.
That's right.
So, Bobby, you know, anytime you call me, if I'm available, I can and I will.
I appreciate you, man.
I just have to do some digging, to do some research, and have to have it rehearsed because I don't like looking at notes. I like as my history teacher used to tell me, well, Leonard, if you know your subject, why do you have to have all your notes?
That's right.
If you know what you're talking is true, then speak it. Right. Speak it with feeling, with passion, so that people know that this is who you are.
Right.
And that was one of the things I learned from my teachers when they were teaching us reading at the old Carver High School. Miss Bain, the late Miss Smith,
Mr. Bain,
and so we have a lot that we were put on us because they cared about us.
Yes.
And that's
and I can tell, I can tell how much you care for our great community. And so we appreciate you, man. Well, listen, ladies and gentlemen, that's our show for tonight. Thank you for tuning in to 100 Yards of Football. Again, this is our Legend segment, and we thank you again, Mr. Bernard Mitchell, for being with us tonight. Peace.
All right, baby. Hey, Rat. Y'all be good. Rattler time.
La la.